Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. Listener discretion is advised. Anger played a pivotal role in feeding my bipolar disorder and depression, as well as complicating social and emotional matters through my high functioning autism. In the mini series prefixed On Anger, I will be exploring the role anger played in my mental wellness and how it was used as a weapon to manipulate me as a straight white man from a blue collar working class background. This is episode 14 On Anger. Are men being scammed by the Manosphere? One of the hardest lessons I had to accept was that my anger made me easy to control. It made me prone to siding with and believing the people who would validate my anger. That made it even harder because I experienced low empathy as an autistic person. The way I experience empathy is different. As far as I can tell, my empathy works backwards. A person with normal or high empathy may look at someone suffering, feel bad, and want to ease their suffering because of those feelings. On the other hand, I can look at suffering and not feel much at all. I have to stop and think about the situation, and then I can start feeling shadows of those emotions. As someone with severe bipolar depression and high functioning autism, all the normal advice people would give about being empathetic did nothing for me. Trying to put myself into someone else's shoes wasn't possible because I just don't see the world or experience the world the same way that they do. Not only that, but one of the predominant symptoms I experience with my bipolar disorder is anger and irritability. It doesn't matter if it was hypomanic or depressed. Most of the time, there was always that low level, simmering anger that would just periodically boil over at the worst times. And I would enjoy that. I would take great delight in that because it felt amazing compared to the emptiness and numbness of depression. But because I couldn't empathize in a typical way, I didn't realize the harm my anger was causing, not just to me, but in my relationships. It was also impossible for me to see how other people were using it against me. Anger can feel amazing, especially when it's validated. I could write a book on the questionable things I've done and participated in because of my anger and distorted empathy. It's easy to act thoughtlessly, impulsively, when you don't care much about yourself or other people. The times I did feel bad, I would just compartmentalize it and shut it down. I found that if I ignored the faint pangs of conscience I would sometimes feel, they'd just go away. And that made it far too easy for other people to influence my perceptions. I would dive into the anger, which would shut my empathy down even further, and I'd get stuck in that mental space. I was too stubborn and untrusting to take anyone's word at face value who was telling me I was wrong. Telling me never worked because I couldn't empathize with the point they were making. And that brings me to the Manosphere. I wasted way too much time in those environments, so let me put it to some good use. The movers and shakers in that world are very similar to some of the people I worked for when I was doing unethical marketing work. Scammers pretty much from top to bottom, exploiting the anger of young men instead of actually helping them in a healthy direction. But here's the secret that they aren't going to tell you. The entire Manosphere is hinged on one big lie, and that lie is, we want to help you. Now listen closely and tell me if you can hear the subtextual scam in this Manosphere pitch. Are you a real man? Do you want to be a real man? Are you alpha, bro? If you're not an alpha, Chad, not a leader, not an alpha, then are you a real man? If you're not an alpha, then other people aren't going to respect you. And alphas certainly don't respect betas, sigmas, or incels, right? Now, did you hear the scam in the pitch? Did you hear the manipulation? It can be hard to notice despite how brazen it sounds. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think about it. Did you correctly identify the contradiction that an alpha doesn't respect men lesser than him, yet he's claiming to want to help lesser men than him be better? I mean, if he looks down on men and boys that don't conform to the model of masculinity that they demand, why the fuck would he want to help you? I'll tell you why. He doesn't. What he does want is to steal your time, your money, your attention, and your mental well-being to feed his own goals, or the goals of whatever shadowy organization is paying him to peddle that nonsense. I gained a valuable insight when I was doing unethical marketing work years ago. That is, there are only two types of people in that world. There are sharks, and there are big fat juicy tuna. The Manosphere is no different. It's the exact same bullshit with a different veneer. The sharks know exactly who and what they are, and all they are looking for is someone to take a bite out of. Now, if you have to wonder whether you're a shark or a tuna, then you're a tuna. But the sharks will feed on each other too. There is no honor or safety among other sharks. Just look at how Manosphere influencers reacted when that video of them throwing Nazi salutes and listening to Kanye West came out. Instead of anyone taking responsibility for their own actions, they all pointed their fingers at who else's fault it was. Sharks will eat their own when they smell blood in the water. Sharks tend to be proud of the fact that they're sharks. Their lack of empathy and taking advantage of people is seen as a strength. They tend to view it as a competitive edge because they're willing to do anything to accomplish their goals. And to them, that's a good thing. Ideas like ethics and morals don't figure into that equation. All they're doing is what many human predators do. They hide behind a smile and friendliness so the target will lower their guard. That's also why, "but I'm such a nice guy" means less than nothing. Niceness is superficial. Almost everyone can pretend to be nice and polite for a while. If a shark acted like a shark all the time, no one would ever swim within biting distance. The main way in which they do this is through a slanted sales tactic. A slanted sales tactic is when you leave out important information to shift the perspective of the consumer to your benefit. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're buying a used car. You find one that's 2 years old at a great price, and it seems like a great deal on paper. Now, normally, you would then take that car to an independent mechanic for an inspection, one that you trust. But the seller says that they don't really have time for that. They say, "Hey, I've got a buyer for this car already. I don't have time to mess around with third-party inspections. So if you want this car, we need to do this today." Now, if you don't know any better, then you may feel the pressure and commit to the sale because you see the low price. It's a fairly new car. What could be wrong with it? But what the salesperson didn't tell you is that that car was already in a serious accident once and was rebuilt. And if you took it to another mechanic, they might be able to glance at it, tell that a quarter panel isn't lined up correctly, and know that it was in a head-on collision. They would see the repairs and they would tell you, "Do not buy this car. It is incredibly unsafe." And that's the reason why the Manosphere is so against seeing mental health professionals. Therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, these people are the mechanics that are going to tell you, "Hey, you're being sold a bad product." They're doing the exact same thing as that car salesman. Don't go to a mechanic or you realize you're about to spend your money on an unsafe car. Don't go to therapy or you'll realize that your emotions are being exploited and you're being taken advantage of. So let's take a minute to consider the characteristics of the Manosphere's target demographic. They may not feel like a real man. What is a real man? Well, a real man is whatever the sharks have defined it to be. The target may not have romantic success, or they've been hurt by women. They may be struggling to get ahead at all in life. They're depressed and angry because life is not good for them. Many are isolated, loners, neurodivergent, or they feel out of place in society. There's a good chance that the tuna just went through a bad breakup or struggling in life. And how do the sharks use that to lure the tuna closer? Well, they oversimplify human nature, the human condition, and they leave out that important information. And if the tuna doesn't have the emotional tools like I lacked, then they aren't able to see what's actually happening. The shark can assume that the tuna doesn't have those emotional tools. Otherwise, they would realize that approach won't get them authentic love and intimacy and connection and all these things that so many men crave. Let's consider one point of influence. Let's consider the whole trad wife traditional relationship image. It has never existed the way that they portray it. Now, I'm a Gen X straight white man from a blue collar working class background, grew up in a conservative area. I grew up around the traditional model of husband, wife, 2 kids, buy a house, and have a white picket fence, which eventually became like, get divorced once or twice and maybe get it right on your third marriage. The American dream. And the women, allegedly, were not only okay with that, but also wanted it that way. Now, I can remember the first time I had a flicker of recognition that something was off about that. It was in my third relationship, because of my first 3 relationships, all 3 of them told me something to the effect of, "Thank you for accepting me for who I am and not trying to change me." The first time I said, "Yeah, no problem," because why would I do that? That makes no sense. I'm dating you because I like you as a person. And that was it. When my second partner said it, I thought, okay, that's a bit weird. All right. But yeah, no problem. But the third time, I was like, okay, what the hell is going on? Because all 3 of these women were dramatically different from one another, from different walks of life, yet all 3 felt the need to make the same comment, almost verbatim. Now, I asked my third girlfriend if men tried to make her be someone she wasn't, and she said yes, every single partner that she had up to that point had tried to guilt, shame, bully, or abuse her into being someone that she was not. They cared more about their mental image of what a girlfriend and potential wife should be than they did her as a person and what she actually wanted. I was dumbfounded because that never once occurred to me as an option. It just didn't make any logical sense. Like, how can you claim to love someone, then try to force them to be something that they're not? If I love someone, I strive to accept them as they are. Why would I try to force something on someone who I claim to love that they don't want? What gives me that right or authority? And the answer is the sharks created the perception of having that right or authority. Traditional masculinity tells men like me that we should have that authority. You're supposed to be the king of your castle, right? Now, their sales pitch is slanted because they're leaving out important context. That context being that you can't bully someone into a lasting change that they don't want to make. All it does is create resentment because they can't be themselves. They don't feel appreciated for who they are, which turns into resentment, which is a poison pill for any relationship. It will kill the relationship. And then you'll wonder why these women leave when men are in like their 40s or 50s. Trying to impose changes like that worked years ago because women didn't have choices. They couldn't work, they couldn't handle finances. Hell, they couldn't get a credit card without a male cosigner until 1974. Did you know that women's suicide rates dropped 20% when no-fault divorce was introduced? These women were not obedient little docile creatures with bowed heads waiting to pop out babies and wait on their husband hand and foot because they wanted to. A man who is lonely and craves intimacy is not going to get it by bullying it into a woman. All that does is create resentment, anger, and fear, none of which can lead to intimacy and connection. That's just not how these things work. Captivity cannot produce a loving, supportive relationship that nourishes you both. How can someone who feels like a prisoner truly love the person responsible for that? And don't say Stockholm Syndrome, because that's not love, that's just trauma bonding. Love can't come from fear. Anything resembling love that comes from fear is coercion. And coercion is a lack of consent. Anger is powerful because it's a self-reinforcing tool of isolation and oppression. I know, in my case, it keeps me from thinking critically if I get too deep into it. The Manosphere is intentionally teaching boys and men the wrong way to go about creating connection and intimacy. Then, when the relationship inevitably fails, the Manosphere already have a built-in excuse. They say it's hypergamy, it's female nature. You should be angry at women instead of being angry at the people who sold you a fraudulent product that was never going to work from the start. And these sharks have also cut their tuna off from meaningful help by convincing them that emotional intelligence is weak and mental health professionals are scammers. Because if you do develop your emotional intelligence, you'll be able to see why their methodology can't succeed in the long term. You'll be able to look at that car and see that the quarter panel is, slightly off, indicating an impact. Everything is flooded with anger, and it feels righteous because the sharks have created enemies to be angry at. They cherry pick instances of bad behavior from these groups and say, look, this is how they all are, instead of acknowledging the fact that people are just people, and some people do shitty things. Doesn't matter what sex they are. Early on in my own journey, there are times when I took offense as a straight white man. I interpreted the anger of women and folks of color as a personal attack, because who the fuck are you to judge me? My journey hasn't exactly been a barrel of peaches, and I took offense at the broad implication that my life has been easy because I'm a straight white man. And they always say shit like, well, if it doesn't apply to you, then why are you upset? Okay, so can I trash talk black folks and women and you're all not going to get upset about it? Of course not. That's ridiculous. We take offense to it because we are perceived in a way that we are not. Or at least I used to. But once I started to understand and soothe my anger, I came to understand what was actually being said. See, the anger of women and folks of color is not an indictment of my whiteness or masculinity, like these influencers and pundits and these assholes claim. I thought it was a personal attack because I was an angry person. And I took everything personally that was not personal. When you're angry or you're depressed, you see the world through a distorted perception and you find problems that weren't actually there to begin with. Because, hey, you want to throw anger at me? I can throw it right back, and I'll enjoy it while I do it too, because fuck you. And that attitude is even worse. So let me put it in a more relatable context. Let's say you're partying with your friend Jack, minding your own business. Another guy and his friend roll up on you, asking you, hey, what's up? Why are you looking at my girl? Even though you weren't, he's just drunk and trying to pick a fight because you're a big dude, and insecure men like to target you to prove their masculinity when they're drunk. He swings on you, you're not fighting him and his dude, and your friend just turns and runs off to allegedly get help while you get your ass kicked. Then, after it's over, your friend comes back, trying to help you up, talking about, dude, you okay? And you are pissed the fuck off at Jack. What happened to ride or die? I thought you were my friend. I thought you cared about me. And you just let these two dudes beat on me? You didn't throw a punch. You didn't try to peel one off. You didn't try to keep them off of me at all. You just ran. You're not who you say you are. You're a coward and a bitch. And then Jack hits you with, dude, don't get mad at me. I didn't do anything. And that's exactly the problem. You didn't do anything when it mattered. I'm not the one getting my ass kicked right now, yet I claim to be a provider and protector, while the people who I claim to care about are getting their asses kicked. Fuck off with that shit. I wouldn't want nothing to do with me either. And that leads into another issue with the whole thing. Sharks are not safe around other sharks. There's always someone more vicious with sharper teeth just waiting to smell blood in the water. You have to stay paranoid around them so they don't smell that blood in the water. But every single man who listens to these influencers is telling them, I trust you and your perspective by tuning in and listening. The tuna is pretending to be something that it's not, fully convinced that they are learning how to be a shark. Meanwhile, the shark is bleeding them dry of their time, their money, their attention, their emotional and mental health. And it's not just that they're stealing the tuna's time now. Because I am Jack, and I have set back my own chances for peace and happiness by years, if not decades, because I've poisoned myself with these antiquated notions of what a man should or should not be. I sit in judgment of other people's lives because my own life has no meaning, no purpose. I want to love and be loved, but I refuse the knowledge and the people that can help me actually get those things. A dick doesn't make me special. It doesn't make me belong with these sharks selling lies meant to cultivate my anger instead of helping me create peace, joy, and happiness within myself. All I am to the sharks is just another big fat juicy tuna. Nothing more. Thank you for spending your time with me. Hit subscribe on your way out and share with someone you think this may help.